I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone that has supported the podcast so far, that has liked the videos, commented, subscribed, all that kind of good stuff. But there's a huge amount of you that aren't following on Spotify, Apple, or subscribed on YouTube. So please do that so you don't miss out on an episode. Also on LinkedIn, we've got the monthly newsletter that is blowing up, and it just means that you won't be able to miss out on any of the download from every episode, or perhaps you just want to go back through and see what was that episode about, is that something I want to go and listen to, etc. So go and do that. The final thing before we do get into the episode, from April when this video comes out, I'm taking on 10 recruiters on an exclusive basis. I've already got 5 recruiters that have taken up, so 50% of the spaces are still available. So if you are a recruiter that is serious and really ambitious, wants to double your billings, master your BD processes, reach out, because I've got a new coaching package that I'll be talking about a lot on LinkedIn. So reach out to me directly. That's enough from me. Let's get into the episode. Hello everybody and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast with your host Charles Kiriakou. Today's an exciting episode because I'm joined by Amy Williams. So Amy and I have been in touch since we've both set up our businesses, which was pretty much a very similar time. And we always catch up, always have fantastic conversations. So I'm just really excited that today we actually record one of our conversations and can share as much wisdom, value, and hopefully some fun stories as well. But Amy, how are we today?
Good, thank you for having me. This is my first podcast since setting up my business about 18 months ago. So yeah,
love
privileged for it to be yours.
Amazing, yeah. Well, we just spent like 5-10 minutes just prior to the to clicking record, just talking through what we're going to speak about. And for the guests listening into this podcast, obviously we'll talk about you and your sort of background in a second, but the things we're going to talk about in today's episode, something that is quite close to my heart, the transition from being a biller to a leader. I think a lot of people that get into recruitment, they have like this end goal of wanting to be a manager or setting up their own business, but they have no idea what it takes to be a leader. And being a biller and a leader, they're so different. We'll talk about finding the balance between a high challenge and high care culture as well. And then we'll talk about creating a coaching culture and all things performance, leadership, coaching. So these kind of conversations I just live for. So I was so excited to get started this morning. But as I mentioned, Amy, people may or may not know who you are, your background, etc. Give us a bit of a background to who you are and what you do.
Cool. So I am a coach, a consultant, a facilitator. I'm all things, but a coach first and foremost. And I've been in the recruitment industry now for about 11 years, which feels like a really long time, but I know you've had some veterans on here that have been in the industry for a lot longer. I specialise in leadership skills and behaviours within the recruitment industry, and I grew and led the performance development team of a business that grew from 40 to 200 plus heads across the UK, Germany and the US, and also essentially was the leadership coach and mentor for that business. And then since launching my own business about 18 months ago, I've helped 25 plus businesses with their leadership capability. And my expertise is in behaviour change and habit change. So I use a lot of psychology, I use a lot of neuroscience in the work that I do to drive skill development and habit change, and really moving away from that traditional style of leadership development, which is knowledge and content consumption, and looking at who is the individual, where do they need to be, where are they now, what can we do, what initiatives can we put in place to actually create the outcome that we want.
Unreal. I'm really excited. So let's get into this. We'll talk about the first topic then, that transition from biller to leader, right? So when I was a recruiter, I like I said in the intro, I was one of those people that was like, right, I want to work my way up and become a manager. That's like the standard progression route for most recruitment consultants. First time I ever got the opportunity to kind of lead was when I was doing contract recruitment, but there was nothing official. There was no process put in place, no training. I just came into the office one day and there was 2 computers by the side of my computer, and then an apprentice just rocked up at 10 a.m. with a coffee. He was like, "Hi, I'm working for you now." I was like, huh? Just like this seems really weird. She didn't even last more than a week because she just didn't even turn up on Thursday. It was really strange. But then when I became an actual manager, my boss pulled me aside. Classic recruitment leader. I've got great news. I'm going to give you this person in your team. Basically gave me as my first person the guy that they were just about to sack because he hadn't billed for like 6 months. I was like, brilliant. I'd rather hire my own person. And he said, well, you want to be a coach, right? This is a great opportunity. He's like, fucking you bastard.
They really set you up. That's it. Yeah, they really set you up for success.
So yeah, I took the guy on, and the feedback I got, Amy, and this is what I want to talk to you about. you're a phenomenal leader, but you're not a great manager. And that kind of stung initially. And I think the reason why is because when you're still billing and you're trying to lead a team, and there's all these various other things that you have to do as a manager, the inspections, the rigor, and all that type of stuff, it was just so alien to me. And because I didn't have the training, I found that transition so incredibly hard. But that's enough about my sort of background. We can maybe like dip into it and stuff.
Yeah,
But tell me a little bit about that transition, like typically across the recruitment sphere from biller to leader.
yeah. Well, what I would say is your experience is 99.9% of the time most people's experience, and that's so common within our industry, and it's why I have decided to specialize within the recruitment industry too, because it's so needed. Usually people either, like you said, I think you said that you were sort of a natural leader but not so much of a natural manager. It's
Yeah.
usually one way or the other. People are typically naturally great managers and are very process driven and like to keep in control, or they are great leaders, and it's one or the other. So that's really common. I think firstly, when you make that transition, your priorities become vastly different. So you go from only having your desk and your business to worry about to having to consider what I would say are like four core areas. Firstly, there's your business, because when you make that transition from a biller to a manager, typically you still have a goal from a revenue perspective, and that's either as a 360 consultant, or it might be that your role turns a lot more client facing. But either way, you've got a huge responsibility to be a role model for the business and to generate revenue, right? So that will always be a core focus. You sort of add three other things into the mix when you make that transition. You start to have to think about your team from an engagement perspective. How are they feeling when they come to work every day? What's their experience of being led by me as a manager? What skills do they possess? What do they not possess? And what's my role in helping them enable those skills and develop those skills? So it goes from your business to your business and your team to then your own personal development. I think when you're a biller, you should absolutely be focusing on your development,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you are going into leadership or not. You should always be looking at getting 1% better, right, in recruitment. But when you're making that transition from biller to leader, there's a whole new host of skills. So your development, your skill development, your knowledge development should be a priority. And then the fourth is the growth of your team. So how are you attracting the best talent? How are you making sure that your personal brand is standing out on LinkedIn, not just to attract the clients that you want to attract, but the people that you want to attract for your team? And how are you making sure that you're doing a really good job of interviewing and assessing that talent? So really your priorities go from your business to your business, your team, your development, and your growth as well. So priority shift, number one. I think secondly, I've talked about this a little bit already, but the skill set of a good recruiter is not the same as a good leader, albeit there is absolutely some crossover. If you're a really good influencer, you can qualify really well, you can prioritize your workload, then you're setting yourself up for success as moving into leadership. But when you do move into management and leadership, it is a completely different set of skills, and you require those, and you have to work on developing those. And then lastly, I would say it's a mindset shift. It becomes so important to recognize that the value that you bring to the business is now growing people. It's not just about making placements yourself. So you have to look at the bigger picture, who's around you, and not be so tunnel vision on your own desk and your own performance.
Yeah, I mean that's a solid answer, and I think one of the last things that you mentioned there, what resonates with me, when I first became officially was like promoted to sales manager. There was three other people in the business, I believe: Simon, Akbar, Catherine, Kieran. We all got pulled into one of the meeting rooms in the WeWork, and the boss basically got on the whiteboard. He wrote, "As a biller, this is how it works. It's you, your team, and then the company. As a leader, it is the company, your team, and then you."
Yeah.
And that mindset shift, you were talking a lot there about mindset shift. That mindset shift for me took probably 12 months for me to really go, okay, cool. I'm no longer, it's not about me anymore. And that's really hard, especially when I was probably doing recruitment 6, 7 years before I got made a manager, maybe less. But
Yeah.
that whole time, it's about hitting your sales number, making sure you're the number one. You are the best business developer. You've sold the most amount of retainers. And now you get a lead from a client, and there's a person on your team that they're hitting their inputs, they're hitting their outputs, but maybe they just sometimes you just need a little nudge or a little bit of help from your manager to go and speak to Amy. I know she's hiring. I was like, oh right, okay, and then they get a win from that, and then boom, the snowball effect. And I remember this one time where there was a lead that I could have easily passed over to my colleague, but in my silly mind, I was like, well, he should have found that himself. So I got it, and I done the whole thing, and then everyone in the office was like, mate, you're a manager now. Like, he's in your team. Like, if he done that deal, that you still get the commission. And I was being that kind of almost too strict of like, you should have found that lead yourself type thing. And I just thought back when I was a recruiter, like the good managers I had, and bear in mind there were not very many of them, but the good managers I had would say, I've built you a list, call through them. I've got some leads for you, call through them. And then help me develop the habit, which we'll get onto later, to go and find my own leads. But sometimes you need a manager to just to help you get that little win, just to get your confidence and to get that snowball effect going. What do you think?
I agree. And leaders eat last is a phrase that comes to mind, and it's a brilliant book as well. Highly recommend it.
Is that Simon Sinek? Sorry.
I think it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that phrase. I so agree. When you're a leader, your purpose, your mission is to build unrivaled trust with your team. Because if you've got trust with them, you've got psychological safety. And if you've got psychological safety, they will typically tell you what's on their mind. And if you know what's on their mind, you can influence, you can keep them
Yeah.
engaged, you can keep them motivated. So that thing that you just talk about there of being selfless is one of the things that's going to enable trust. Trust is a component of your character and your credibility. It's your ability to build, to be a role model, to show how it's done, that credibility piece. But your character, like your integrity, the fact that you think about other people before yourself, that's massive. If you can nail those two things as a leader, you can show that you're a decent human and you really give a shit about your people. And you can show that you know how to do the job and you can lead them to do the same. Winner.
Yeah.
And what I would say is I've seen leaders with one or the other, right? I've seen leaders that bags of credibility when it comes to how to do the job really well, and not so much in the way of integrity
Yeah.
or selflessness that you talk about, or the other way around. They've got great EQ, their ability to show that they care and to create a safe space for their people is high, but the credibility and the skill to be a fantastic recruiter is not there. So if you can get both. There's a book in my drawer. I really want to rummage around for it, but it's called The Speed of Trust, and it talks about that a lot. It's brilliant.
Yeah, nice. Well, I look back and I think, like going from sales to leadership, that's like the most difficult transition for me. And I think for a lot of people, when I moved into L&D, and 5 months into the L&D gig, I got signed off to hire an L&D consultant. And you mentioned there about like the personal branding element and all that, and all the rest of it. I actually, the reason why, well, not the sole reason, but one of the reasons why I hired my first hire in L&D was I'd done a video about why join me and why join my team, and I had like some info behind me on the TV, and it was just me just talking passionately about kind of who I'm looking for, what I can offer them. And the girl that I ended up hiring, when she got on board and people said, what made this opportunity stick out, and not just like, it's not me brushing my ego, but she was like, the video Charles put out, no other L&D manager done a video like that. Like, it just seemed like quite modern, and I like the idea of personal branding and stuff, and just the passion and stuff. And that job, because I didn't have to be selfish in L&D. It was such an easier transition. It was like, I have a buddy here that we can do presentations together, we can bounce ideas off each other. It doesn't matter if I win. But going back to what you said there about like the integrity, the selflessness thing, I remember numerous times being in director meetings and meetings with the ops team and stuff, and literally just being in front of a firing squad and just being shot at by the directors and just saying, I'm not leaving until you give her a pay rise. I'm not leaving until you give her extra annual leave. And I literally would come out and you'd see her, and she would vouch for this as well. And she'd be like, I saw them screaming at you in the meeting room. And I was like, yeah, because you work so fucking hard for me. I want to make sure that you're happy. And for you, you're paying like £700 a month for travel is bullshit. So whatever happens, I'm going to make sure you get a pay rise.
Back.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And
I think if you can show that, I've got your back, I will run through walls for you. Whilst I think there's a balance here, you also can't be an absolute nightmare for those above you. That's not going to help anyone. But I've got your back, and you are that middle bit, that guard in between.
Yeah.
God, yeah, like you will go far as a leader.
And that's what I was picking up off of what you were just saying there, and if we could just go back in time and be flies on the wall as to when I had that conversation with her, and you just see the reaction in her behaviour where she taps me on the shoulder and goes, I really appreciate that, leave it with me, and then she just goes back to desk and just fucking grinds. She's helping every consultant, going out of her way, going the extra mile, and it's like 5 o'clock and I'm like, right, what are you doing after work? She's like, oh, I've got to do this presentation for tomorrow morning. I'm like, mate, go home. You've got a long commute. She's like, no, I've got stuff to do. And I'm like, you can go home, it's fine. She's like, you're working hard for me, let me work hard for you. And I remember going home at night going, do you know what? That's such a fucking good feeling, knowing that you're working hard for this person and you're fighting their battle and you're getting it in return. So, you know, that was a really, really nice thing.
That's the law of reciprocity. Right? The law of reciprocity says that if you show something, you will get it in return. A lot of the leaders that I work with, they often come to me and they go, this is just this, I don't know what it is, but that person, their morale is low, or they're not quite who they were. And my question to them is always, why? Why is their morale low? And 9 times out of 10, of course, they don't know, right? And that's it's normal, I think. It's not right, but it's normal.
Yeah.
And where was I going with this? Often, my advice is show vulnerability to them. If you show vulnerability to them, they'll show vulnerability to you, and then you'll get the reason why their morale is low. So go into that conversation.
Can I just pick you up on that quickly? So, when I was the L&D manager at my last company, I became a mental health first aider, and sitting down with a lot of, like, let's face it, right, a lot of Gen Zers have high levels of anxiety. They're looking at these social issues and they're like, oh my God, the world is ending, blah, blah, blah. As a senior person within the business and as someone that has gone through mental health struggles and stuff, I try to make it my mission to be open, be vulnerable, but not too much, because I think there's a fine line. If I just sit there and be like, I didn't want to get out of bed this morning, rah, rah, rah. Like,
don't play your soul.
Yeah, exactly. There's a healthy balance, right? But the fact is, when I used to do that, I used to get a lot more buy-in from all levels of consultants, managers and stuff, because they're like, oh, fuck me, one of the senior people in the business understands what I'm going through. They've got empathy. They're not just sat there saying, get back on the fucking phone. But senior leadership would say to me, don't open up. Don't tell people that you're going for an ADHD diagnosis. Don't tell people you're going to be medicated. Don't tell people you ever had any mental health issues, because it's a sign of weakness.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you asking for my opinion on that? Like, what?
I mean, I'm assuming you have the same opinion as me, as that's an extremely archaic mindset.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my response to this, and I want to provide something helpful as opposed to opinionated. Look, I think if you can demonstrate that you are human to someone, you are less of a threat to them. And if you are less of a threat to them, they are more likely to trust you, feel safe with you, open up to you. If you are going through life hiding the most vulnerable, most human parts of yourself, and you appear to be this sort of robotic poster recruiter leader that does nothing wrong, never feels like shit, you're just not going to win the hearts and minds of your people. So it goes back to what I said, law of reciprocity. You show it, you'll get it 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's a balance. Like you do not want to be coming to work going, this is everything that's happened to me. Because you do also want to show that you as a leader are in control, and that you are you're a steady, stable leader to them.
Yeah.
But absolutely sharing what's going on for you. God, that's so powerful. So powerful.
So the last thing I want to talk to you about on this particular topic before we move on to the high challenge, high care thing, I've spoken to a few people on the podcast about who should and who shouldn't be in the recruitment sector, but we've never really had the conversation about who should and shouldn't be in leadership.
Yeah.
The interesting thing I will say on that though is that a good friend of mine, he came to my wedding. We both got promoted to manager at the same time. He kind of was doing a bit of leadership before me, but then we both became like officially promoted to manager at a similar time. When he first became a manager, I remember going to lunch with him every day. I don't want to mention his name because he might hate it, but we used to go to lunch every day and he used to say to me, "Oh, so-and-so's got so many fucking issues, can't be asked. So-and-so just, wish you'd just get on the phone." And I'm just looking at him like, "Mate, like, you're a manager now, you're a leader, you need to be helping these people." So I don't care. I'm here to make money at the end of the day. And I just remember thinking like, you're in the wrong fucking role. Like, you're in the wrong role. But then one day, a fucking switch just happened. And I don't know whether it's just he moved to a different company and there was just different processes put in place. He now manages a team of 10 plus consultants, manages to bill 500k a year. And I met everyone in his team about a year and a half ago. Every single person said he was the best manager they've ever had, the best leader that they've ever had. And I was like, that's
So he did a bit of a 180 then.
Massive 180. And but the thing is he's still billing consistently and even more than what he was when he was just 360. But back to my initial question, what types of people, like say for example, if you and I set up a recruitment business, we've got a ton of investment, we've got budget now to go and hire multiple recruiters and we want to get like future leaders and stuff. What would you say are like the behaviours of someone that makes a good leader, and what are the behaviours, characteristics that make someone go, that person shouldn't be in leadership?
I've got so much to say about this. I've got so much to say about this. Okay, firstly, and probably most importantly, people who want to be. People who want to be a leader. That's the first thing. One of the most common mistakes that I see in our industry is senior leaders and business owners shoehorning their top billers into leadership positions without really having much in the way of a conversation with them about whether they want to or why they want to. And because that top biller is hungry, wants to progress, and can only see that as the next route, they go, okay, I'll give it a go, right? When actually they don't really want to. They are motivated by making money. They're motivated by a different sort of challenge, or whatever it is that they're motivated by. They're not motivated by leading and managing others. And you're taking somebody that's exceptional at generating revenue from your business out of a revenue generating role and into a role that they don't even want to do. So the first thing is, let's have a really good conversation with them to understand whether they want to and why they want to. So understanding what their intrinsic desire is, right? If you are someone that wants to be a leader because you like control, you like to you want to make more money, you like authority, don't do it. If you are someone that wants to genuinely see people grow and develop and you get a kick out of that, if you are someone that you're really motivated and interested in the wider organizational piece and how to take the business to the next level, absolutely explore it. So it's firstly, do you want to be a leader? That's the second thing. The first thing, sorry. The second thing I think would be some very specific traits. So, and you can spot these in recruiters, that you don't have to give them a bit of a trial run. You can see this within recruiters. Do these recruiters lead with influence or authority? So are they naturally supportive? Do they naturally guide others before they have the manager title? It's that concept of personal power over position power. Do they lead with personal power? You can see that in abundance in recruitment consultants, whether it's how they interact with trainees, whether they put their hand up to deliver masterclasses, that sort of thing. Strong communicators. Can they give feedback? Can they hold people accountable? Do they avoid the tough conversations? People that can shift from me to we. So people that understand that it's not about their personal billing, it's about the wider team. Are they a team player in general? Yeah. Even before you start talking to them about leadership. People that are self-aware and coachable. So people that will if I ask them, tell me what your top three development areas right now, yeah, they might need to think somewhat, but after a little bit of thought, they could go this, this, and this, as opposed to, oh, I haven't really thought about it, I'm not really sure, and I don't know if I want to give it much thought. So
Mm.
people that are self-aware, coachable, and then I think people that, and you can, again, you can see this in consultants, people that have high standards and people that also have and sort of lean on they've got a sensitive side to them, they've got emotional intelligence, they've got it's that high care high challenge approach that I talked to you about quite a bit before the
Hmm.
podcast. Can they lead with high standards and also build trust? Can they show
Mm.
credibility and build relationships through the character that they have? And then I think the last thing, I told you I had so much to say on this, I think the
I
last
love
thing
this.
is, and this isn't an easy thing. You don't always, I think this can be a transition. You don't always have to have this in the beginning of your leadership
Hmm.
journey, but you need to be able to make the transition from, sorry, being liked, wanting to be liked, to wanting to be respected. Typically, when you're a consultant, you're a part of a group, you're going on incentives, you're going out after work, you are a friend, you're a mate, and it's making that transition from mate to leader
Mm.
to I don't really care about being liked. I care about being credible and respected.
Yeah, that's huge. I can't remember where I first saw that. And I honestly wish that someone told me that when I first got promoted to manager, because I think, and I can't remember who it was I spoke to yesterday. They were saying about how recruiters are very sort of ego driven, and I think largely you need an ego to be successful in whatever you do, but you need to manage that ego. And when I was a younger recruiter, and a lot of recruiters I know, they don't really think about the being respected. It is just the being liked. I think that is almost like just a natural human instinct, is that you want
Yeah.
people to kind of like who faces it? Like, let's face it, sorry, who really wants people to dislike you? It's not really an enjoyable thing going into the room and people going, we're not going to eat here anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's not really a nice
And at the
thing.
same time, though, I have had leaders that, not mentioning any names, I've had leaders that I haven't particularly liked,
Mm.
but I've really respected, and they have taught me so much. I think
Mm.
the argument here, and where I so agree with you, is would I really run through walls for that leader? Would I
Yeah,
want them to still be my leader now? Did I have the nicest life with that person as my
yeah.
leader? Probably not, but I bloody respected them. But yes,
Yeah.
if you can get both, great. But I think the priority should always be respect. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, 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 you did not. No, 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 that's absolutely fine. No, but look, I want to move on quickly because I'm conscious of time.
Yeah,
You just mentioned it a few sentences ago about that high challenge versus high care.
yeah,
When we talked about it briefly before we started recording the podcast, I was really excited to just let you just roll with that one because I get it. I understand that, but I don't think many people would necessarily have heard it. So just tell us a little bit about that. But whilst you do that, give me two. You can continue talking.
yeah.
Some idiot is mowing the lawn,
How dare he?
and I can hear it. I
Dodgy.
don't know if people can, but it's doing my head in, and I'm struggling with concentration as it is.
That's
And you're
quite
just giving.
premature. It's only March.
No, but to be fair, it is absolutely gorgeous. Like, we are recording the 7th of March. My missus woke me up this morning and was just like, I've made you a coffee. I was like, ugh. She was like, I'm having it outside in the sun. I was like,
Oh, I love
oh, okay. Literally sat out, because we got a new patio, just sat outside of the patio with the dog, like, this is fucking nice. This is very nice. But yeah, this bastard that's mowing the lawn now, can you not? I'm doing a podcast. Give me
Yeah,
2 seconds. But answer, whilst I'm doing that, I'm
sure.
literally 2 seconds. Answer the question then. So tell us a little bit about high culture versus high challenge versus high care, sorry.
Sure. Okay, cool. I feel like I'm talking to myself for a little bit, but that's fine. So typically when people ask me the question, what's the number one challenge that you see when it comes to leadership in the recruitment industry today? The answer is this: managing performance. And I don't mean managing performance when it's gone Pete Tong. For those of you that are Gen Z, that means wrong.
Good
I
clarification.
don't mean managing performance when it goes wrong. I mean managing performance from day one, because even if performance is good, it can always improve.
Yeah.
Now, most of the time, I see businesses that are either and you've got a bit of a spectrum, right? You've got high challenge, you've got high care. They are either over here on the high challenge side of the spectrum, where they are running boiler room type businesses, and if you're not fast, you're last. Like it's its expectations are very, very high, and I love that, by the way. That's not a bad thing, but the support that you get to meet those expectations and the chance that you get to meet those expectations doesn't really exist. So there are businesses out there that are running their teams in that way. Lots of good stuff about that, lots of bad stuff about that, okay? Then you've got the other side of the spectrum, which is high care. These are the businesses where they will have consultants going 12 plus months not contributing any revenue. And there are always excuses. Oh, they've been with us for a really long time. They're a really good culture fit. They're great on a night out. We don't really want to have a conversation with them because we don't want to upset them. And they're running nurseries. So it's, how do you land in the middle? How do you create a high challenge that is, high expectations, always striving for high performance, and not letting people not live out their full potential, but also giving them the chance, the support, the time, and the care to, and the psychological safety and the environment to do that. That for me is a high care, high challenge culture. And I think there are sort of 5 things really that I would look for in a business that show that they're finding that balance. The first thing is that there are clear expectations across the organisation, right? So no fluff, just direct, transparent conversations about what good revenue looks like here, what good quality looks like here, and what behaviours we expect based on the values and culture of the organisation that we're trying to develop or maintain, right? So clear expectations. You'd be so surprised how many times I have asked a consultant what's expected of them, a manager what they expect of that consultant, and the answer has been very, very different.
Yeah.
So clear expectations. Secondly, real accountability. Praise when it's due, challenge when it's needed. So not avoiding discomfort. That's the second thing, and probably one of the harder things, I think. The third thing would be support, not rescue. So coaching people to solve problems rather than fixing things for them because of a want to be in control, or a want to do things easily, or a want for short-term results and not long-term thinking. The fourth thing would be genuine investment in people. So knowing what drives your people, knowing what is important to them. And I don't necessarily mean, oh, this person wants to buy a new house and that's what's driving them at the moment, or this person's got their eye on a new Audi, or that person's next promotion is X. They're extrinsic things, and that's not a bad thing to have extrinsic motivators. But what drives them intrinsically? I'm coaching somebody at the moment that has said, I don't really think my manager knows what drives me. And to be honest, I don't know if I could articulate that. We've talked about her extrinsic motivators, but we're now getting into her intrinsic ones. And her intrinsic ones are a sense of ownership. I want a sense of ownership over something. I want to feel like I'm challenged. I want to feel like I'm always growing. And I don't feel like I'm getting any of those things. So if you can create a role for that individual where they feel like they're getting a sense of ownership and challenge, that's probably going to do more than a role where she sees the possibility of going on holiday to the Maldives in 6 months, although that would be nice, right? So it's finding that balance between the two. And then the fifth thing is, it kind of links to the real accountability, but consistent feedback, not just at review time, not just in your MBR, not just in your appraisal, but in the moment, all the time, positive and constructive. Those would be the 5 things. If you're doing those things and you're doing them well, you're doing more than most is what I would say. And when I say doing those things, I mean doing them and doing them well, right? Having a you can have an accountability conversation and it not be great. versus one that's really empowering and really clear. So it's
Yeah.
developing skills to be able to do that.
Love that. That right there is going to make a phenomenal clip. So for future Charles, like just snip it here, and you've got yourself a very good clip there. I want to ask you something about where you just said about the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, because as an L&D person, I find that to be one of the most important things. Obviously, with what I do, it's predominantly business development focused, and business development it can be a very challenging task at times because I do call coaching sprints with recruiters for an hour, and for the whole hour, we just get voicemails or we get fuck offs, right? So it's where you said about that, leaning into the discomfort. I say this to recruiters all the time that, especially with clients where you're having to have difficult conversations, it makes the relationship better and makes you stronger, having to do the difficult things on a consistent basis, etc. But I've always said to leaders, and I've always said to managers that in order to get the most out of your recruiters, you need to understand what their why is, like what their motivators are, because there's no point, right, saying to someone, oh, you could earn all this commission, and then that person's not really that. And let's face it, that the vast majority of recruiters are motivated by money, like that's a fact, but it might not be the sole motivator, or just saying money isn't enough. But like you said, if it's the Maldives, or if it's I can't remember who said this on the podcast, that if I earn X amount of money, I can say to my dad, there you go, I fucking don't need you anymore. I told you so. There's like an intrinsic one, which is linked with the extrinsic money motivator. So it's going deeper than just saying, oh, matey boy is motivated by money. Oh, she's motivated by holidays. He's motivated by Rolex. It's just, there's too one-dimensional in my opinion. So as a coach, I'm interested to hear from you, to learn from you, and also to give value to viewers, listeners that are maybe in a leadership position that maybe don't coach enough, that maybe just go that one layer. What are some coaching questions you would recommend to get deep into understanding extrinsic, intrinsic motivators, would you say?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we need to, as leaders, give our teams more credit than to think that they are that simple, that they are motivated by a holiday or a car, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Like we are complex human beings. Like, not to get deep here, but I remember when I was in my 20s, the thing for me was show. I hope he never watches this. Oh my God, I really hope he never watches this. Showing my dad that I'm a bit of a legend. Like that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to show my dad that I was like, I bossed life, I bossed my career.
Yeah.
So for me, it was always, earning the money, getting the promotion, getting the title, buying the house. It was the bigger why was to show that I am like the dog's bollocks, really, to my
Yeah.
dad, and to probably anybody else that cared. I honestly don't think, Charles, that there are any magic wand questions that are going to help you as a coach find out what the answer to that question is. What I think is, go that extra layer and ask why more than you would ask what's the I saw this the other day. It's all okay. One more question, always one more question. So when someone says, why do you want to bill? I want to bill because of X. Why is that important to you? Because of, why is that important to you? Maybe don't use why. Maybe use what's the reason instead, because why typically promotes like an emotive response. So rather than why, what's the reason for that? What's the reason that?
Yeah.
What would that give you? What would that enable you if you had that?
Yeah. I was going to say just on that, there's two things. I've always mentioned to people about that why question, and when I'd done my coaching and NLP training and stuff, they were saying a very similar thing about the why question can sometimes almost be like the sharp knife in the chest, like, why do you want to prove your parents wrong? That it's like, oh, I don't know, it's deep. So I always say to recruiters that, if you're doing a BD call and, maybe the client says something and you want to ask why, I've noticed that when you just put, like, obviously tone is everything, right? But if you just use the word out of curiosity or just out of interest at the end, it softens resistance, especially if it's done with the right tone. So if you're working, again, if a leader is listening to this and they're like going to have a conversation with a recruiter and you want to find out what their intrinsic motivators are, and maybe the recruiter comes back and says, I want to prove my mum or dad that I can do this, rather than just say why, because again, that is like fucking hell. Just be like, oh, interesting. Okay, just out of curiosity, why would you think that is?
Yeah.
It's just there's borderline no resistance just by using that out of curiosity word.
If you're a football fan,
Yeah,
who do you
unfortunately,
support?
Tottenham. Unfortunately,
Okay. So if I asked you why do you support Tottenham versus what's the reason do you support Tottenham, why would probably go, well, because I do, because they're, well, you know, you probably say something, you'd probably say, I don't know why.
it's my dad's fault. It's my
But
dad was a Tottenham fan, and we
yeah,
had to
cool.
support Tottenham, and then you
What,
just don't change teams. So
if I were to say what's the reason, you'd come up with a more logical,
yeah,
possibly a more logical response to that. So yeah, it is the what's the reason over the why. But I think to answer your question, there's a couple of things. Always ask one more question. Always ask another. What's the reason for that? And what's the reason for that? And what's the reason for that? This goes
yeah,
back to my point earlier about if you're a good qualifier as a consultant, you're probably going
yeah,
to be
yeah.
a good coach. The second thing would probably be, I think it's less so in a coaching conversation and more so observing what your team like and don't like. When are they most motivated? When are they not? I'm an insights practitioner, and insights can be great for, it's a psychometric tool for anyone that doesn't know. It can be great for identifying your team's motivators and demotivators. But just even by asking your team, like, what is the ideal environment for you? What do you need that you don't have right now? Asking those questions to that individual that I mentioned earlier, yeah, it was really easy for her when I asked those. It was, yeah, a sense of challenge, a sense of ownership. Okay, and on a scale of 1 to 4, how much do you feel like you're getting that at the moment? 1 to 4, because otherwise 1 to 5 is like people typically go 3 and land in the middle.
Yeah.
1 to 4, how much do you think you're getting that right now? What's the gap? So it's asking your people what they're getting from their environment and what they're not getting from their environment that will typically give you a bit of a clue as to what their intrinsic motivators are.
Yeah.
Like for me, when I moved in, I don't know about you, but when I started my business, I was craving more variety. I love variety in what I
Same.
do. So that was an intrinsic, freedom is an intrinsic
Mm-hmm.
motivator for me. Freedom of choice. So
Yeah.
again, what you can get all those things in any environment, but it's the leader that needs to enable that.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that a lot. Have you ever heard me talk about? I've nicknamed this Charles's 4 magic questions. Have you ever seen this? I've posted it on LinkedIn a couple of times.
I haven't, but I'm curious.
So you'll like it. So in NLP, the coaching framework, they talk about chunking up and chunking down. And when I got into the L&D role, went through their training materials, they called it linear questioning. So it's like questioning in a linear line, right? It's both very, very similar things. So the four magic questions, which I think you'll really, really like. The first one, which is the most standard coaching question, is, and what else? So the minute someone gives you the answer, you go, great, okay, what else? Most recruiters, when they're qualifying a candidate or client, or managers that are trying to get more info from their consultant, will ask, is there anything else? Which is a closed question, which 9 times out of 10 people, they just go, no, I don't think there is. But you just have to have a high level of EQ, because if you ask, and what else, 15 times, you're going to get a really strange response with people going, all right, fuck off, like you've got too much. So just be intelligent and say, okay, and what else, if anything, and as the final one. The second question is, why is that? And then again, if you've got a good rapport or whatever, that's fine. If perhaps it's a sensitive topic, you can use the out of curiosity, and again, tone is everything. Another one on top of the why is that is the, okay, and why else would you think that's important to you? Why else would you say that motivates you? That's a really, really deep one. And then the final one is, who else? So perhaps in a coaching situation, it depends on the situation, but for example, every single candidate and client call I used to make when I was in nursing recruitment, it was drilled into me. Thank you very much for your time, Amy. Oh, one last thing. Who else do you know that I should be speaking to? So that I've brought that into everything I do. So now when I speak to an MD for a recruitment firm, if I speak to someone about the podcast, I always ask, who else do you recommend that I speak to get on the podcast for me to work with, etc. So those are 4 key questions that I always say to people to use. They're Charles's 4 magic questions.
I'm an advocate of all of those, and the neuroscience angle that I come at this with is that the what else, what else, what else, what else. I mean, typically after a couple of times, my coachees look at me like, you're really annoying me now. And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, no, I know. It's my job to annoy you.
I know.
But when we say what else, we're accessing a part of the brain that we wouldn't if we didn't ask it.
Hmm.
And that part of the brain is typically more subconscious, and we have to work harder at using it. But that's where thinking outside the box
Yeah,
actually happens. So
yeah, yeah.
I think outside the box. Well, how about ask me some great questions so that I do think outside the box? So yeah, I love those.
Have you ever heard of, because you like your psychology and stuff, have you ever heard of a psychological like coaching technique called perceptual positions?
No, but
Oh,
I'm annoyed that I haven't. Like,
oh,
tell me
I
about
think this
this.
is a very sort of NLP type technique,
Yeah,
but it
I
is,
did an NLP foundation, and most of the coaching work that I've done is neuroscience, so it's different, but I've done my
yeah.
NLP foundation. But yeah, sorry, tell me.
So I'm just going to search up something else as well because there's another thing called Cartesian questions, I think, which
I've
you'll
heard of
also find
Cartesian
quite.
questions.
They're the ones that are like, what would you do? What won't happen if you don't do it? And basically,
So, yes. So
if
these are questions that typically at the beginning of a coaching session or at the beginning of a coaching arrangement with a client, I will ask these questions. I had a client very recently who I said that we shouldn't work together because
Mm,
of the answers to some of these questions. So what would happen if
mm.
you didn't work on your time management?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Probably not a lot, and actually I probably wouldn't. Yeah, cool. There's no need here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those questions when we first learned about those, like we had to do like the coaching scenarios in front of the entire cohort, and like when it was like, so what won't happen if you don't do this? And it's just you're just sat there like, what will not happen if I do not do this? I don't know. The question doesn't make sense, and then everyone around the room is just also like their brains are scrambling. And the whole idea of that is that when you've got a coachee that is being very binary with their answers and just like, I don't know, Amy, I just don't know what motivates me. Okay, well, what won't happen if we don't look into this? And they go, oh, computer's disconnecting, I don't know. And it just basically allows them to just think differently. It's almost like taking some sort of like chemical compound, but it's just a question basically. But going back to the perceptual positions, I think you'll really like this. So the first time I ever did it, I like worked with my NLP coach. I was going into leadership, etc. And you have the coach's seat, the coachee seat, and then the meta seat, right? So the coach will ask the question and say, I'm just trying to think of some sort of question like, we'll go back to the motivators, right? What is the thing that motivates you to come into work? And I sit there and I go, do you know what, Amy? I really don't know. I'm struggling to think about what motivates me. You know me really well though. We've known each other for years. I don't know. And he goes, okay, cool. Why don't we just stand up? You're going to sit in my seat and I'm going to sit in your seat.
Okay.
And then you're going to be the coach and I'm going to be you. So if you were speaking to yourself, what would you think, you know, etc., etc. So I done this the first time I done this in like a coaching type position was with a guy called Alex. It was, you know, those people that are like, oh, coaching don't work, it's all bullshit, like that, and you're like, right, okay, mate. And he asked me a question like, I don't know how to get this person set up for the day. It was done remotely, so I couldn't physically change seats. But I just said to him, I was like, okay, fair enough. Well, if you were a recruiter and you were struggling to get set up and you were to sit down with a manager, what would you want the manager to do? And he literally just went, well, I'd want the manager to do this, the day plan should do this. Oh fuck! I've already got all the answers. I was like, fantastic. So you know, but sometimes people when they're in their when they've framed it like it's them, they can't. But if you kind of make them almost imagine that they are the coach or they are an
Yeah.
established manager, they've got the ideas. And then if you want to go one step further, then you again, it's ideal if you do this in person. You get them to sit in the third seat, which is like the meta seat. So that's the observer, the person that's observing in on this conversation, and you basically just frame the question of if you were an observer and you've heard what the coach, the manager, the leader, etc., has said, the consultant, the coachee, whatever has said, what else, again, going back to that question, what else would you add to this scenario to additionally help? And then there's just loads more. And then all of a sudden, you've got coachee perspective, coach perspective, meta perspective. You've got three different perspectives
Yeah.
and actions to add. It's awesome. I like it.
I I know this as something different. So what you're talking to me about, I use in my
Oh,
coaching
really?
work. Yeah. So
Nice.
I know it as cognitive behavioral chair work.
Okay, all right, nice.
Yeah. And it is quite frankly game changing. I use it remotely and I use it in person, but is more effective in person.
Yeah.
It can be effective remotely. So I'll give you an example of how I've used it. A leader comes to me and goes, I don't know, I've got beef with my manager, or my new hire is really stressing me out, and they're they're having a moan, right? They're
Mm.
having a moan, and the feelings and thoughts that they've got about that person isn't allowing them to overcome the situation, look at it rationally, look at it logically, and move forward and overcome it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've done it before where I've gone, okay, like how creative, how open-minded are you? And they're like, yeah, go on,
Mm.
I'll try anything. And I'm like, okay, what we're gonna do is you're gonna get off of your seat, you're gonna leave the room, you're gonna come back in the room as the person that you are having beef with. And I'm gonna ask you some questions, and you are that person.
Mm.
And what that act has done is it has put that person, put the coachee in the frame of mind of the manager that they've got beef with, or the new starter that they're finding really challenging. And I've asked them some questions as the new starter. What is it that you might need more of from ex-coachee? What's your
Mm.
perception on the relationship between you and it's so interesting what comes out. Some people listening to this podcast are going to go, what? They're going to go, that sounds a bit naff. And I might do myself out of clients, right, by talking about this. But it's absolutely game changing for a lot of people. If you are open minded, the thing that it can do, how it can influence your brain
Mm.
is incredible. I've coached people on limiting beliefs, and I've got them to be the persona of their limiting belief
Mm.
before, and it's triggered emotional responses, it's triggered clarity, it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, no, I love all this stuff. It brings me back to when I first done my NLP training, and when you said about the limiting belief stuff, I can't remember the name of the technique now that we did, but it's something to do with that you basically pick that limiting belief and then you almost create like this fictional character and you give it arms, legs, eyes, name, etc. And then it's like, what happens if you tie a balloon to its arm, and then another balloon and another balloon, and now imagine it floating away from you, and then it's like this psychological phenomenon of this limiting belief
Yeah.
of like when I was 23 as a coach, I was like, no one's going to listen to me. I'm 23. I still live at home with mum. I have no value to offer. It's a limiting belief. You know the questions. You know how to qualify. Like you can just you're fine. So like you create like this fictional thing. I think mine at the time was like SpongeBob, and then like tying the balloon to his ankle and then seeing him like float away, and then like the coach going, right, break state, what are we doing for lunch today? And you're like, huh?
Well, that's like hypnotherapy. That's like
Yeah,
hypnotherapy. So
yeah.
if I were you doing cognitive behavioural chair work with you, I'm very conscious of time, so I'll say this quite quickly. If I were doing cognitive behavioural chair work with you, and let's say we were talking about your limiting beliefs, I would interview you as if you were Charles's limiting belief. So I might
Mm.
say, hey, Charles's limiting belief. How long have you been in Charles's life for?
That's so crazy, isn't
And you
it?
might say, and that question alone will probably take you back to a memory. That question
Mm.
will take you back to a memory of, well, you've been in my life ever since. I don't know a lot about your life, Charles, and I'm sorry if what I'm about to say is triggering, but you might say it might be something like since my mum and dad divorced or whatever,
Mm.
right? It might be that's how long. Okay, and what's purpose do you serve in Charles's life? Like,
Mm.
why are you sticking around for? Like, what do you try and protect him from? And the emotional and I can think more the clarity that people
Mhm.
get from that experience can be mega.
Oh
You
yeah,
have to be minded for it though. I
yeah.
didn't know we were
It's
going to talk about this today.
honestly, this is the thing, right? This is what I love about doing this podcast is that we set out like three key sort of topics. We've already covered two, and we're basically covering the third one. But like, there's so many cool little snippets, and like that's something that I'm actually going to start taking into the coaching sessions is like addressing, because like you got to think, right? I predominantly do BD stuff. So many people, even I still have like a little bit of imposter syndrome or some limiting beliefs around my BD stuff, because I've only been running a coaching business for a year and a half. I've done recruitment for like nearly 10 years. I know how to fucking pitch a candidate in. I know the process of like chasing a lead like the back of my fucking hand. But this is so different from me. So I sometimes have like these limiting beliefs, and I'm like aware and conscious enough of how limiting belief works, the self talk and stuff. But the consultants I deal with, like 20-year-old me, if I had this thought in my head that goes, oh, you know nothing, blah blah blah, that would grow and foster in my head. So you going into coaching sessions now and identifying the limiting beliefs and talking to them as if that's them, the limiting belief is going to be power. But the last topic before we wrap up and do the final question, Amy, because I'm really keen to just get what your synopsis is on this. And with the topic was like creating a coaching culture, right? Whenever I've worked in businesses that have a coaching culture, it's just been so much more enjoyable. Retention rates have been so much better. When I've worked in businesses where there is no coaching and it is kind of, that meme of like the leader whipping its people and then the other one where it's the leader where it's like pulling people along with them type thing. I've worked in both types of businesses, and maybe I'm biased because I'm a coach now that the coaching culture works, but maybe you've got some more like, I don't know, data behind it or some of your own experiences as to why it works. But why do you think it's such an important thing for businesses in recruitment to have this coaching culture, do you think?
Well, one thing that you should know about me is I'm not a stats person.
Oh, fair
I'm the
enough. Me
person
neither,
that
really.
when anyone throws me a stat, I'm like, yeah, but, and I always want to dig into it. So I'm the last person for a stat, but this a coaching culture, a coaching culture. You have to have a coaching culture nowadays. The next generation, the current generation, require this of you.
Yeah.
And why does it work? It works because you are tapping into an innate human desire to always grow, get better, improve. That's self-efficacy, right? When we stand still, we're not developing skills, we're not feeling challenged, our confidence reduces, right? So a coaching culture is important to keep people engaged from that perspective. A coaching culture is also important because typically, if you have a coaching culture, people feel psychologically safe. Again, so if you are not dictating, but you are asking great thought-provoking questions, your people are more likely to feel comfortable. If they don't have an authoritarian style leader, they're more likely to speak up, they're more likely to bring ideas to the table, they're more likely to challenge what you say, they're more likely to experiment and therefore potentially bring game-changing ideas to the table. So if you don't have a coaching culture, you don't have psychological safety, you don't have psychological safety, you don't have all of the good stuff that comes with that. What you get are people literally making decisions based on fear and a heightened sense of, like the cortisol, fight or flight, making decisions based on fear. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. So it's you have to have it because the next generation, the current generation need it, want it. Quite frankly, it's something that is being talked about so much, and therefore, if you don't adopt this and you don't take it seriously, you will fall behind. You will be seen as archaic. I hope that answers your question. It's so necessary.
Yeah. No,
Why would you not want it?
yeah, I'm totally with you. Maybe another question I can ask you then. Two parts to this. The first part of the question is, if you are joining a recruitment company as just a recruiter, whatever, how would you identify a coaching culture? Would be my first question, and then the second question after that would be more along the lines of maybe you didn't necessarily have one, but you're trying to make one. What some key steps that you can take to then start shifting into a coaching culture. But yeah, the first question, as I mentioned there, is if you're going into a business, how can you really identify whether they actually have one or not?
I think the first thing would be to considering the person that's interviewing you, the lead, your potential leader. How often do they ask you questions? Of course, they'll be asking you from an interview perspective, but how much do they try to learn about you and your motivators, demotivators, what you want out of life, development areas you want to work on? So how much does that leader ask versus tell? There are a lot of leaders that will interview, but they will spend the majority of the time selling their business and telling them what recruitment is to make sure that they want to do it. So how much does that person ask you versus tell you? I think come armed with some questions for the interviewer about what people are working on within the business. Um, what are your top billers, top three development areas at the moment, and how are you helping them to get 1% better? Really plugging the 1% better today.
Thank you.
Um, who are some people within your business that are underperforming, and what have you done about it to support them? So really focusing on the development side of things and finding out how much of an emphasis they put on the development side of things. There's a bit in here about, feedback being two-way, which I'll probably come on to again, but feedback being two-way from the perspective of how open is that manager and that leader for feedback. So the last person that left your business, what feedback did you get from them and what did you do about it? Did you ask for feedback? 9 times out of 10, the answer to that is no. And then I think, there was something I wanted to say, and it's gone out of my mind. I think what I wanted to say is, when you give that leader feedback or that person that's interviewing you feedback, how do they receive it? How do they respond to it? There's so much opportunity throughout the interview process to give feedback to the interviewer and the business. So how do they take that when you do give it? I was speaking to somebody recently who had a load of numbers prepared for her interview, and the interviewer didn't ask her any questions about that, and she was a little bit alarmed by it. So she decided to ask them. She said, I've prepared a lot of data about the team's performance that I used to lead, and da 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 da. You haven't asked me about it. And that's feedback for you. Like, that's something that I would recommend doing. And they got really defensive.
I bet, yeah.
And that was a bit of a sign for her that actually, what they should have done is gone, yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Thank you for sharing that feedback.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of things that you can do to assess whether that business has a coaching culture or that leader has a mindset of a coach before deciding whether you want to join them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you mentioned there, I think almost entirely, and I'm sure you might have some other points, but almost entirely answers the second question around if you're wanting to shift into more of a coaching culture, then shift from telling to asking. And that was the biggest feedback I got throughout the entire time when I was learning coaching and NLP and stuff is, because we had to do a coaching session in front of the entire cohort, which is a terrifying task when you first, especially I was like 21 at the time, 23, 24 at the time. Everyone in the room was like in their 40s. They were all like directors and HR and all the rest of it. And I was just terrified. But the feedback was always, you ask one or two questions. Again, I didn't know Charles's 4 magic questions back then. So I was just, I was asking like, what's the intrinsic motivator? Right. It seems like your intrinsic motivator is X, Y, Z. And then the person would be like, oh yeah, I think it might be. And then the instructor would always like interrupt and be like, look, your energy is very infectious, but like, just ask one or two more questions and shut up and see what happens. And it's the same thing that trickled down into my recruitment. And I say this to recruiters all the time now. If you ask a client, like, what's been your experience working with other agencies? Has it been bad? Has it been good? Or no, just shut the fuck up. Ask the question. Be confident in your open question. Go silent. Have good posture and just trust it and it will work. Yeah. It's the same thing as a coach. I've worked in businesses before where, and I've heard this recently, where it's like, you need to work with us because we're going places. We've got an amazing industry we work in, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, cool. All right, cool. You going to fucking ask me anything or what? Like, you going to ask me about anything to do with me? Or like when we go through development, I've sat in meetings where they go through PIP with people. Right, looking at the data, you're struggling here. So what we're going to do is this, that, and the other. Ask the fucking guy a question. That's for me, like in terms of like building a coaching culture, think about where you can ask, not tell in as many situations. What would you add before we wrap up?
Yeah, like 100%. Involve the person in the conversation, for God's sake. It's not hard. I think, you know what, I do empathise with leaders. I really do. I really do. It's really not an easy job. And I think if you've had a leader that's been very authoritarian and very directive with you, you're likely to be very directive with your people. So that, I empathise, I do. So I agree. Involve the person in the conversation. Ask more than you tell. I think there's a balance here. In general, ask more than you tell, especially when it comes to reviewing performance. I think that when you have, especially new starters, or you're giving somebody that's experienced something new, be really mindful that the balance of their skill versus their will is going to determine whether you do ask or whether you do tell. So when you've got somebody that is coming into your business, that enthusiastic learner, they are low skill, high will. They
Yeah, yeah,
are, tell me everything you know, it's going to be amazing. Don't coach that individual. Tell them what to do.
yeah.
Demonstrate what best practice looks like. Observe them, correct them. That's what they want. If you had never driven a car before, you got in the car and you went, and your instructor went, so what do you think you need to do? You'd be like, what? So I do think that leaders need to know when to coach, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
something
yeah.
that I work with a lot of leaders on, knowing when to coach. Most of the time, though, you have a team of people that have some skill, otherwise you're doing something wrong. Some skill and varying will, their motivation, their confidence goes like that. That is the opportunity for coaching. And that is most of the time in recruitment. Some skill, varying confidence, varying motivation. That's where we should be asking people questions. How do you think it's gone this month?
Yeah.
What's the reason you think it happened like that? What are some of the challenges that you experienced? How did you try and overcome them? What would you say to somebody that was experiencing the same challenge as you when it comes to this? How motivated are you to do X, Y, Z next month? What challenges do you think we'll get in? Actually, it should probably be like a 70-30 conversation, as in 70 them, 30% you, but
Yeah.
typically what we see is the other way around. And I think leaders go into these conversations fearing, like, I don't want to not be in control. I don't want to not be prepared for a bit like today. Like, I wanted to make notes because I wanted to feel in control and I wanted to make sure that what I was saying made sense and that the audience got something from it. But actually, it works best when it's just don't feel like you have to have control over exactly what's going to happen when it's going to happen, because you wouldn't expect your consultant to go into a candidate call with a script.
Yeah.
So have a conversation.
Yeah.
Just have a conversation. Probably
I
not the
love.
most groundbreaking point that I'm going to make today, but just have a bloody conversation.
Yeah, love it. And just to echo what you just said there, it's literally the conversation we had before, right? Of you just saying like, because like so many people, they jump on a podcast and it's like a nerve-wracking thing. If you've never done it before, like anything in life, if you've never done that one thing before, it is nerve-wracking. If I had a penny for every single time I've recorded, this would be like 34, 35 episodes now. The vast majority of people, like, they come onto the show and they're like, oh, can you send me a load of questions, or can we edit this, that, and the other? I'm like, mate, it'll be fine, we'll just have a
Yeah.
conversation. And honestly, you've added a tremendous amount of value. I've taken away a lot of things from this, and I think anyone that's even just got remotely this far, they would have taken a shitload of value, Amy. So no, thank you very much.
Good.
Last question, as you know, following today's episode, how can people get 1% better in recruitment?
Yeah, so I'm coming at this from a different angle today because I want to tie leadership into this. I wrote a post about this on LinkedIn. Anybody that follows me probably would have seen it because it was one of my most popular ones recently. And it's this concept that being easy to manage is an underrated career hack. So if you are currently a recruiter, think about how you can be easier and more pleasant to manage. And what I don't mean by that is be a doormat, be a yes person, overwork, suppress your own needs, have no boundaries. I don't mean that. I mean, communicate really clearly with your manager about what it is that you need more of from them and less of from them. Give them feedback. I mean, keep your manager updated without needing to be chased and asked. I mean, take responsibility for your shit. If you know that you're not going to meet your KPI or your revenue target by the end of the month, don't wait until the end of the month. Have a conversation with your manager to go, I'm struggling. I would really appreciate having a conversation about how I can change something or do something differently to meet that target. And I mean, look, I've said this, I empathize with leaders, especially in the recruitment industry, especially right now. It's really hard. Leadership is hard. So have an appreciation for the pressure that your manager is under.
Yeah.
Because most of the time they are just wanting to do a really good job. And it is absolutely your responsibility as much as it is their responsibility to help them do a good job. So yeah, a very different angle. It's not necessarily BD focused, but I think it will stand you in good stead for a really successful career.
That's phenomenal advice. I said this to you because that's the one thing I always say to people. If you do want to prep for anything, that's the final question. And when you explained that to me before we click record, I was like, oh, I've had so many various different types of answers to this. And when I went to the agency expo in Birmingham, I was just going around and asking people that one question. I've never got anything remotely close to that. And if I look back when I joined Projectus, when I went into perm recruitment, it was largely exactly that. Like, making my manager aware all the time of what's happening, where I needed support. We had that coaching culture, and that's where I really, really excelled. So I think that is absolutely phenomenal advice. Amazing. Well, look, thank you very much for taking the time, Amy. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm assuming if people want to reach out to you, it's just on LinkedIn. Is there any other sort of ways that people can reach out to you? Yeah. Perfect. No worries. Well, look, I'll put your LinkedIn information in like the body of this podcast. But for people that have made it this far, thank you very much. I probably might do a video before this, but the stats on people that are unsubscribed or don't follow the podcast on the three different channels in comparison to people that are, it's something like a 60-40, 70-30 split. It's just, yeah. Just if you're listening, if you've got this far, just click subscribe, click follow Spotify, Apple, etc. Like, comment, all that type of good stuff. It just helps grow the podcast. By the time this comes out, I can't remember what time this will come out, but we're closing in on 50 episodes really, really quickly, and I think we're probably going to be having to up the amount because the amount of guests that I booked in, it's the 7th of March today. Literally, I've done a post about international. This I was going to say to this to you, Amy. Sorry, done a post about International Women's Day yesterday. I got 3 women that are going to be coming on the podcast. One that's coined the TikTok queen. She works for Sourcewell. She's phenomenal at cold calling. Got an L&D person that's going to be coming on. A Team GB silver gold medalist that's going to be coming on as well, that does all things psychology, business development, leadership. So we're going to have some just outrageous guests coming on the podcast. I mean, we already have had some immense guests, but it's only going to get better. So yeah, thanks for all the support for everyone. Keep supporting the show. We're going to do really, really big things with this. That's enough from me now. Until next time.